The Frank-Starling law of the heart is something that you absolutely have to know for tests. Um, it's referred to other things too. I put them in parentheses. Starling's law, the Frank-Starling mechanism. Sometimes it might just be FS, something like that. So anyway, but what the Frank-Starling law of the heart is it's all about preload and stroke volume and stuff like that. And let me just show you on this flow volume loop here. So you can see this blue one that we have, our generic flow volume loop. Okay, so what happens if the heart gets filled more passively? So remember, from here to here is passive. The heart is not contracting. So usually usually we would stop right here in diastolic volume. But let's say we keep filling the heart to here. So a new end diastolic volume, okay? So, and once again, I'm going to beat this to death, but we're in the left ventricle, okay? So what happens is we filled the heart more, okay? So it's just like a water balloon. If you take a water balloon and you fill it more, then that water balloon is going to want to contract harder and squeeze the water out. And the heart's the same way because of the elastic properties of the heart, the compliance of the heart, maybe you could say. So you get to this end diastolic volume, which is higher, and the heart being kind of like a water balloon, it contracts back. And so what happens is you have your isovolumic contraction. Now notice here, do you remember what this point is here? We can kind of consider it afterload. And actually, I'm just going to say we are going to consider it afterload. There are exceptions, but yeah, just consider it afterload. So look, afterload hasn't changed. Contractility also has not changed on any of these graphs. And how can you tell that? You can tell that by this peak isovolumic pressure line. So again, that's another point that gets beat to death. This is PIP, the peak isovolumic pressure, and that is a measure of contractility. Contractility has not changed, and you know that because if it did, this line would have shifted up or down. So if contractility went up, the line would be up here or something like that. So anyway, hasn't changed. So the only thing that's changed is end diastolic volume, and what's another way of saying end diastolic volume? It's preload. And sometimes preload is used more than the word end diastolic volume, but you could also say end diastolic pressure. Okay, so as we go up on this line here, as we have our isovolumic contraction, we get to our afterload, which is where we open the aortic valve. Then we have our ejection, and we eject blood, and boom, we end right here on the peak isovolumic pressure line. And so our stroke volume is what? It is from here to here now. Our original stroke volume was from here to here. So what the Frank-Starling law of the heart is this is a way of compensating. It, whether somebody went into heart failure and now their body's retaining a lot more water, and so there's a lot more volume, so the heart's getting stretched out more, or whether it's just a beat-by-beat variation, the Frank-Starling law of the heart is a compensation mechanism. So that's what you need to remember is it's compensation. So, beat by beat, it's not going to be the exact same amount of blood that goes in. And so if the exact same amount of blood doesn't go in, then you're going to, the Frank-Starling law of the heart's going to build more pressure by using that by using the passive properties of the heart wall. It's going to stretch it out more, which is going to build more pressure. You can see that the pressure gets up higher here than it does here. And if we passively fill the heart even more to here, and you see this line is curving up, then it's going to create even more pressure. Now you can see it's still opening the aortic valve at the same point, but the pressure is getting higher, but it's still same contractility. So the stroke is ending on the peak isovolumic pressure line, and then it's having isovolumic relaxation and coming back. So beat by beat with the heart's going to be compensating using the Frank-Starling law of the heart. If the heart goes into failure, the Frank-Starling law of the heart's going to compensate for the heart failure. Heart failure meaning that there actually is a loss in contractility, so the peak isovolumic pressure line would come back down to there. And so the kidneys would be less perfused, and that whole renin-angiotensin-aldosterone thing would happen, and there'd be more volume in the body. And so more volume means that we're going to be filling the heart larger, say to here, and then we eject, And so if we have lower contractility, we end up on this peak isovolumic pressure line, and boom, we come back down to here. So now the stroke is from here to here, and so we've kind of maintained our stroke, because our original stroke is right here, this one right here, and now our new stroke is right here. And you can see that we are maintaining our stroke somewhat. Complicated topic, but hopefully this makes sense. The Frank-Starling law of the heart, it's a passive thing. It has to do with the passive properties of the heart. And let me say a couple more things about it. It has to do with the fact that you have these sarcomeres where they're getting more stretched out, and maybe more actin and myosin are interacting. You also have the elastic properties of the connective tissue in the heart. But there's one important thing is if you go too far here, instead of being able to generate more passive pressure, it's actually going to start to go down like that. And what happened for it to go down like that? Well, now this actin and myosin that interacts here, and this is really a bad drawing. Now it's not interacting. So if I kind of just drew like this, that actin and myosin is no longer crossing. So that's why if you stretch the heart out too much, it's not going to be able to contract back. So hope that makes sense.